My guest today is Professor Tanya Luhrrmann, who's Professor of Anthropology at Stanford University, with a courtesy appointment in psychology. Her work focuses on the edge of experience, on voices, visions, the world of the supernatural, and the world of psychosis. Welcome, Tanya.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, the psychosis part I'm very interested in.
Okay, good. We can talk about
Because
that.
I
That's great.
did some work in life sciences, but the supernatural part also I'm very interested in. So just to set the context, Tanya, I grew up in South India, where uh, and I went to school in Chennai. I know that you have done some work in that
Mm-hmm.
area in the sweltering
Mm-hmm.
heat. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but supernatural is sort of a game of the region, so to speak. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you cannot turn a corner without experiencing some sort of a supernatural phenomenon. And so I'm interested in both of these concepts. So, but I want to start with one of your papers. Porosity is the heart of religion. So you say here when scholars and scientists set out to understand religious commitment, the sensation that gods and spirits are real may be at least as important a target of inquiry as the belief that they're real. The sensory and quasi-sensory events that people take to be the presence of spirit, the voice of an invisible being, a feeling that a person who is dead is nonetheless in the room, are found both in the foundational stories of faith and surprisingly often in the lives of the faithful. These events become evidence that gods and spirits are there. I find this very interesting, Tanya. So let's take a step back. So, I mean, clearly there are differences in individuals. As I mentioned, yeah, so I grew up as a Catholic in South India, and I was never really religious. When they started playing cricket on Sundays, I left the church and started playing cricket.
Mm-hmm.
And spirituality is not something I ever really got a definition for or understood. So as I mentioned, so I might be the worst subject for you to teach. So say talk a little bit about what you're talking about here.
So the general idea in when people talk about the supernatural or the spiritual or the religious is that they're often talking about a visceral sense that they have, a really in their body sense that they have, that
Yeah.
there's something more than the everyday world, that there's kind of more aliveness, more presentness,
Hmm.
more like there's a mind someplace out
It
there.
gives them energy in some ways
Well,
to
the
think about.
first point is
Yeah.
that they experience it.
Okay.
So it's not an idea people have. I mean, people experience this in different ways, but many people, and certainly many famous people associated with founding religions, have had a visceral feeling. It's like not an idea. They have experienced the way you experience wind and air and water.
Mm.
They experience that there is a being outside of them who's bigger than they are and is
Mm.
somehow in contact with them. So that's something that they feel.
That's what they feel. So a lot of the famous scientists, as you know, Einstein, Maxwell, and others, even Newton. I don't know if, yeah, I think even Newton. Um,
Very much Newton.
yeah,
Yeah.
so very much believed in this idea that there's something out there that we can define, we can really understand, but whatever they have done from a scientific perspective is sort of outside that in some ways. I mean, outside may not be a good word, but they never felt comfortable saying everything in the world is engineering, scientific, technological.
You're completely wrong about Newton on that point. Newton
Okay,
wrote over 1 million words on alchemy. He was very involved with,
yeah,
with his religious ideas,
yeah, that's what I
and
mean.
that's
Yeah, all scientists, I mean, Einstein never rejected God.
Yeah, it
Um,
doesn't.
so,
Yeah.
so all famous scientists never really got into a position that says, yeah, there's really no God or
Okay.
no spiritual position that they could get into. All of them were sort of spiritual in many ways, right? If I understand that word properly.
Mm. I think many humans are spiritual. Not all of them are. And there are also scientists who are not spiritual. Um, but in any event, so I think that the relationship between science and spirituality is a great and deep question. What I've been really looking at is trying to make sense, just a little bit of sense of how people come to have the experience that a God is present and what factors might give rise to those experiences, how to understand that phenomenological event of feeling that there's something bigger than you.
Yeah, so you've been doing research in this area for a long time, and um, so we argue that the heart of such spiritual experience is a concept of a porous boundary between mind and world, and the people in all human societies have conflicting intuitions about this boundary. So, I guess let me ask you this: I can imagine different levels of porosity. So, for instance, I'm interested in any topic pretty much. I start from a point that I know nothing about it. I typically don't know anything about it. So I let any information, any idea in, um, but that is different from the porosity you're thinking about, right?
So the argument that I've been making, and I wrote that article with my co-author Kara Weissman. The argument that I've been making is the way people think about their mind helps to make sense of some of the vivid experiences they have of other beings. And the paper starts by making the argument that humans, by being humans, distinguish between consciousness and the world.
Mm,
They understand that there's a difference there. They feel a difference. Consciousness is an experience of being aware of yourself. It's Anil Seth talks about it as the experience of being you.
mm,
Your feeling of you-ness is kind of what consciousness is. It's an awareness.
mm,
So we humans distinguish between that and the stuff we're aware of. The trees, the sun, the star, the ground. And I think that young humans pretty much everywhere develop a way of thinking about that difference between awareness and the other stuff. And they come up
mm.
with a probably default model of how mental stuff works.
Yeah.
I think they're at this default model is that mental stuff it's yours. It feels like yours. It's that quality of you-ness
Mm,
or myness is what William James called it.
mm,
It's private. Other people can't see what you're thinking. It kind of feels like it's inside of you, for want of a better term. It's kind
mm.
of, it feels like it's somehow in your body rather than sitting on the windowsill.
Yeah.
And those thoughts don't get out of your mind to go do things on their
Hmm.
own in the world.
Mm,
But all people have conflicting intuitions about that model because
mm,
everybody sort of accepts this way of thinking about uh, was way of thinking about mentalish stuff. But people have powerful dreams. Dreams don't
mm,
feel like they are always just from inside of you. Sometimes it feels like anger is sweeping over you from outside.
mm,
Sometimes it feels like, your heart's so big, your love is gonna explode out of you. So they sort of have these ideas and they almost have these feelings that somehow this mentalish stuff is not just inside them and private and impotent, kind of does stuff. And so in this article, we argue that, in fact, people have live in cultures, and these cultures elaborate these, what you could call these porous intuitions. So like the idea of prayer, it involves the idea of God, but it also involves the sense that when you think really, really hard about something in the right way, your thought is going to go out into the world and make a difference. Or ideas about witchcraft. Those are really ideas in which one person has a mean, malevolent intention about somebody else, and they think very, very hard. And maybe they say a certain, special words, or they do special things, but somehow that intention goes out into the world like a force.
So sorry to interrupt, Tanya. So yeah, I didn't quite appreciate this. So the porosity that you're talking about is a two-way street.
Yes.
In the sense that if you're sort of closed in with no porosity, whatever you're doing, what you're feeling, what you're thinking is sort of an internal process. The world cannot benefit from it. So in some sense, a porous mind could possibly add value to the world, value to the world in a higher level, right? Possibly.
So, I mean, clearly people have ideas, and those ideas lead them to act in certain ways which have an effect on the world. But the idea of supernatural power is really the idea that mentalish stuff acts in its own right on the world. That you think hard, and somehow those thoughts leave the mind and they do things. Or somebody dies and their mentalish stuff stays around, and we call it a ghost. Or, the spirits are really minds without bodies.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're very smart minds, sometimes they are not very smart minds, but they're minds.
Yeah, I mean, so I have had a lot of neuroscientists on the show, Tanya. So, we tend to think about the brain as sort of a quasi-computer. Um, it is very complex, and it can make up things pretty easily. And that making up part of it could lead you to a lot of bad societal outcomes. We have had elections here. We have had a lot of conspiracy theories. So the brain can be quite amenable to suggestions, and that is not really what you're talking about, right?
So I'm trying to I'm trying to root a bunch of religious ideas in the way that humans feel their thoughts, what is the experience of being human.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to say, well, okay, let's pay attention to the way people experience their mental life. And maybe something, the way that we pay attention to our mental experience, well, maybe that in some general sense has a relationship to why we have these ideas about gods and spirits. You might also say, and more specifically, do these ideas we have about our mind, do these predict religious experience? So here's an observation that I try and understand.
Yeah.
Many people have what you would call a hallucination. They
Yes.
have experiences, they hear a voice, and nobody's there to speak. So it's a
Right.
pretty common experience. A lot of people have many of those experiences, and they're very, very, very upsetting. Typically, those people are psychotic. We call them ill. But a lot of people in the general population have at least one kind of odd event like that. So it turns out there is a story to tell about how those odd events are patterned. So that's something that I do. I sort of say, look, you look at people and a bunch of people in Ghana, you look at a bunch of people in Thailand, look at a bunch of people in the United States. Turns out that the relative rate of certain kinds of vivid experiences people call spiritual, there's a structure to them. When people, it's a lot of people have the experience of having they feel that a thought is not their own. They feel that God has spoken to them inside their minds. They feel that there's an invisible being present, gives them goosebumps. Very, very common. And then there's, there are other things like having a voice, having a vision. There are more dramatic things like feeling that your mind has left your body and is roaming on the astral plane. Those are a little less frequent. So there's a structure to those experiences.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Tanya. So you talk about frequency, and if you're very frequent, then it is sort of in the life sciences realm. If it's not that, if it is very rare, then it has some value. If I understand this correctly, correct me if I'm wrong. But then most diseases we characterize them as a spectrum. It's not a binary disease state. Um, you start somewhere and you progress into a measurable disease state. So this frequency of these ideas, is it really that robust to say that if you experience this once every 3 months, that's okay. If you experience it every day, it's different.
Well, so I think there are two important things you've said, and I'll many important things, but two of the important things you've said is that yes, what we call psychosis, which is the experience in which people's thoughts and perceptions are really askew from the world. People think that there are, they have electrodes implanted in their teeth and the FBI is listening in, or
Yes.
they hear somebody talking to them all the time. So that experience, that is a continuum. So there's some people who are very, very, very ill, and some people who are not very ill.
Yeah.
I am also arguing that that is not the only reason why people have vivid experiences.
Yeah.
That it's very human to have conflicting experiences of your thoughts, and very human to have voice-like or vision-like experiences, because our relationship to our thoughts are so confusing. And that can be helpful because sometimes those experiences are pretty helpful. I mean, it's obviously good for your body to believe in God. Abundant evidence of this.
Yeah.
People
So
do better when they are religious.
let me ask you this. I haven't thought through this, Tanya, so I don't know much about this. So um, is this a escape mechanism for the brain? So we know that when we do analysis of dreams and things like that, the brain is sort of playing out things for future benefit of the individual. Is this some sort of a mechanism like that, you think?
So I'm not a neuroscientist, so I don't make claims about what the brain is doing. I think that it is part of the human experience of thinking that we have lots of paradoxical experiences of thinking, and we're scrambling to make sense of them all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you say here we have found that spiritual experiences are facilitated when people engage their more porous modes of understanding, and that such experiences are easier for individuals who cultivate an immersive orientation toward experience and engage in practices that enhance inner experience. So it's almost like there's a necessary condition of initial conditions for this to work. For a hardcore scientist, looking at data all day, this might be quite difficult to get into and to appreciate, possibly.
Well, so first of all, you yourself just said that scientists were often religious. Um, I'm not making a claim about whether God is real or not real, or whether this God is real or this God is not real, or that God showed up to this person and didn't show up to that person. I try to figure out, how people experience their thoughts and how they think about their thoughts, and
Yeah.
whether that might have a relationship with whether they have vivid spiritual experiences.
Mm.
So those vivid experiences are, sometimes kind of like scientific discoveries. People have some event and it's like a big deal.
Mm.
Often when, one of your countrymen, Ramanujan, the great mathematician, he said
Mm.
the goddess, I think it was Namgiri, that she
Yeah.
whispered his formulas to him in his sleep, and he woke up and he wrote them down. So
Yeah.
so people have these experiences. I am interested in what we know about how people relate to what it feels like to think, and
Mm.
and those kinds of vivid experiences. You might even call them like the liminal zone. So
Yeah.
people kind of live in a zone that is, it feels real, but they know it's not real. They have these experiences. The experiences feel real, but they know that like there's no person there. There's no, there wasn't
Mm.
really an angel looking in at the window.
Mhm.
And so I'm just trying to make sense of those experiences because they've been so important in human life. And then
Yeah.
obviously important in religious experiences. I mean, that's why we have many of our great religions.
Mm.
Somebody had a powerful experience, and then they, have a whole theology that they
Mhm.
generate to make sense of that experience.
Yeah. So I want to ask you. So I cannot read this in the paper, Tanya, but so this must have had some evolutionary benefits for humans. Religion must have been a technology that they used to survive and thrive.
Religion is great for people. It
Yeah.
often has specific results that are not so great. So, you could say that you could see those specific results that are not so great in Gaza. People, two groups of people, different religions, a lot of hatred and animosity. But
Yeah.
being part of a group in which you have a shared expectation of good
Mm.
behavior because you're part of the same group, particularly if you've got a God who knows what everybody's thinking.
Yeah.
So those are certain kinds of gods. One of my colleagues, Aranor and Zion, calls them big gods, the
Mm.
gods who know what you're thinking. There's an omniscient, omnipotent gods. Being a member of that group has a lot of social benefits. People are more likely to feel close to each other. They're more likely to trust each other. They're
Mm.
more likely to behave according to the rules laid down by this religion. It's also socially really beneficial. So a lot of these, in one of these
Mhm.
religions, you get an extra person to be friends with. So people often experience God as a person, and
Yeah.
God can be a big improvement on your parents. And God, and if you spend a lot of time, trying to get to know God, the way that a religion invites you to get to know God, then people sometimes really do end up with this vivid sense of
Mm.
a being who's invisible, but is kind of a great friend, really loves them. He's in their corner for them, or she's in their corner for them. And that's pretty persuasive evidence that
Mm.
makes people feel less lonely and is good for their body.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, but there's a dose question here, Tanya. So, uh, you mentioned Gaza. Um, if the 8 billion people in the world today have a universal religion, let me put it that way, that's a different situation. If the 8 billion people today have segmented themselves into 200 countries and I don't know, 6, 7, 8 religions, and they go to war with other religion every other day, that's not a good good religious situation. But
Well,
that is practice. That's what we have. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, of course, that wouldn't explain.
You still there? Tanya, you still there? Tanya, are you back?
Okay, yes.
Oh,
Hold
okay.
on.
So I thought I lost you. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So
yeah,
we were
the screen went white.
okay. Okay. You can hear me now.
Yes.
So we were talking about this multitude of religions around the world and the friction that we have among them. And so religion has a positive effect on humans, but it could also have a negative effect on aggregate
Absolutely.
societies, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. It's kind of like a rational brain. Also has some values and some costs.
Yeah. So from a policy perspective, so this is actually so what happens in science and technology, I think they faithfully reject religion. I'm sort of one of them. But then what you're arguing here is that, yeah, step back and look at it. There might be interesting attributes, interesting things you can learn from it and use. Um, but the counterpoint is that we know that the negative utility that religion has brought to Homo sapiens. And so I think many of the scientists sort of step away from it just because of that, and they miss a dimension. I think that's what you're arguing.
So I don't have a view about whether people should be religious. That's not my job or my aim. I'm trying to explain why some people have vivid religious experiences.
And get
And
value from it.
well, why they have experiences. So
Yeah.
some people have voices, hear voices, they see visions, they have powerful dreams that keep them, that change the direction of their life. That zone in which vivid things happen has also importance for scientific creativity and for writers who write. And there's something quite interesting about the zone of the real but not real,
Mhm.
where people have experiences that feel real, but they're not real in an ordinary way. So
Mhm.
I'm interested in that. I'm interested in what value that those experiences bring to people and how they're related to madness and whether they
Mhm.
are like madness or not like madness and what we can say about that. Um, I sort of back off from trying to give policy
Yeah.
answers to the questions of whether people, these
Yeah.
big questions about whether we should be religious or not.
In religious and spiritual, I would imagine, right? Even though I don't quite understand what that means, but I mean, a lot of people tell me that they are not religious, but they're very spiritual. So what do they mean by that? Do you know?
They typically they mean that they don't agree with any particular religion, but they think there's something more.
I see.
So they think that there's something that is more than the material world, that there's this force or this higher power or this super energy or there's
Hmm.
this, so somehow a distant mind that is, somehow making sense of and giving purpose to this everyday world.
Hmm. So they haven't subscribed to a prescriptive notion of religion, but they've subscribed to the idea that some construct like that could be quite useful.
So
That's what it means.
sometimes, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is now kind of a lot of people in America, like
Yes.
28%. And we don't really know what people think. I'm actually trying to find that
Hmm.
out. Um, but uh, but they're frustrated with the religions they have tried. So
Yeah.
often these are people who used to go to a Christian church or their parents went to a Christian church, and they are, um, for whatever reason, they don't want to do that anymore.
Hmm.
And so, but they haven't, they still want something like purpose. They still want a sense that they are engaged with this somehow a big goal.
Hmm.
So one of the things that mainstream religions do for people is they often tell them that just doing their job, being in the world as they are, is fulfilling a kind of purpose. That's why Rick Warren is one of the most important evangelical pastors in America,
Hmm.
or he was. And he wrote this book called The Purpose Driven Life.
Yeah.
And the first line of the book is, "It's not about you," and goes on to describe the readers of the book
Hmm.
as put in their roles by God, and their purpose is to glorify God by doing those roles
Hmm.
with warmth, compassion, efficacy, determination, trying to create a better world, a better community, a better way of being.
Yeah. Yeah. So in a world of egocentrism, um, spirituality could be a way to get out of prison, so to speak. If you're running hard to get to some destination, you don't know what that destination is. When
Right.
you get there, you say, "This is what I lived all my life for," right? So this is it's a technology, it's a tool that might
Yes.
get you out of prison some ways, right?
Mhm. Yes.
So that's a way to think about it. So this every so you see here in the paper, everyone has conflicting intuitions about the mind. I mean, this is definitely true. Every culture, every scientific discipline uh, has conflicting intuitions about the mind. So this is not in your research, but I want to ask you on a tangential question. So we have this thing called going on called artificial intelligence, and it seems like half the technology crowd think artificial intelligence is God because it knows everything.
I don't think they
And
think that yet, but they
a Nobel laureate came out and said, "Hey, you guys are all done in 5 years. The AI is going to kill you all." I'm not that pessimistic. So we have a technology angle here. So we have created sort of an artificial God who apparently knows everything. So in the more colloquial sense, does the God know everything, or is she just sort of guiding you to some other place?
so there are different kinds of gods, different kinds of social worlds. And the way that Aranor and Zion would make that distinction be that they're big gods. Those are gods who are like the God in Christianity or Islam or Judaism. That's a God who can read your mind. That God knows everything. And usually, when humans imagine such a God, that God is understood to know everything, to be able to do anything, and to be good, right? You wouldn't really imagine, if you're human, you wouldn't imagine God otherwise, because then God would be a fiend. And perhaps, God is a fiend, but that's not the way humans have typically imagined God. I mean, the challenges of thinking that through are what resulted in the book in the Hebrew Bible called Job. That tried to kind of imagine God with a fiendish side. And how would you understand that? And could humans do that? And so because that's a sort of end point of one way of imagining God. There have these shared characteristics among the great religions. Often within periods of time within those great religions, this God has local cultural styles. He is kinder or less kind. So the Christian God has obviously gotten kinder in the last 2,000 years. So you just look at the way that faith communities have imagined God, and it's very, very clear that there's a shift around the 4th century, another shift around the 12th century, there's another shift around the 17th century. And right now there's a big shift in which God is kind of a, for many versions of this faith, for charismatic evangelical Christianity, God is imagined, is not accessible to everyone. So these communities really represent God as a great big teddy bear, utterly lovable, utterly in your corner. It's also true that in communities that have what you would call little gods, those gods have different characteristics. Sometimes those gods have, almost always, they have much more limited power. So, a Zeus can, wreak havoc, but Zeus doesn't know everything that his wife is thinking. Zeus also can't interfere with everything that Athena is doing. So, and they get into battles. The little goddesses, the household goddesses in traditional South India, have a lot of power over a very small number of people. They don't really have, they don't really travel. So you can, like in some parts, when I was in Ghana, people would, for example, go from Cape Coast and they'd go into the north of the country where the gods were said to be very powerful, and they'd bring a god back in a pot.
Oh, wow.
So you could actually carry a god. And the people have lots of complicated ideas. The god is both in the pot and also sort of in other pots as well, but somehow he's more your God. So people have a lot of different ideas about God.
Yeah, so I want to just touch on something else, Tanya. So somewhere in the article you say porosity is the heart of magic and religion. I'm very interested in this magic concept. Growing up in South India, every street corner there was some sort of magic going on, and people were, very believing in magic, and again, just like anything else, it has a downside as well, right? So if snake oil folks create magic, they could control a population and direct them to vote for X or Y or something like that, right? So magic has a dark side, has a downside.
Sure. And modern biomedicine is probably more effective as a surgical tool than magic. It's also true that placebos.
I'm not sure modern medicine is any different from magic, but yeah, I'll
Okay.
let you do that. Yeah.
So placebo is pretty useful.
Yeah.
People often feel more comforted when they have a magical power on their side.
And a good
But again,
doctor.
Hmm?
And a good doctor that they believe in. So the placebo effect on the
Mhm.
medication is also a placebo effect on the human. Yeah.
Sure, you're right. Right. Good. And so magic is quite fascinating. It's I it's very much like religion. It's a idea about thoughts that travel in the world. So magic is typically, some person has an intention
Hmm.
that they place somewhere, like they place it into an amulet, and that intention has a kind of power
Yeah.
which radiates.
Yeah. So my daughter who's an OBGYN now, Tanya,
Mhm.
every time she comes home during Christmas time, we watch Harry Potter, all of them, one
Oh,
after the
good.
other. And she has seen them like 15,000 times, but we still have to see them. But I like Harry
Oh, that's
Potter. I mean,
lovely.
that is beautiful, isn't it?
Yes, no, that's a lot of fun. That's great. It's good to have a Christmas tradition.
And so I want to go into, I finish up with your talk in the American Philosophical Society. And you say here, let me just read um, the work suggests that it's possible to learn to experience some thoughts as not me and it's not inside. And if that humans do so with the intent of experiencing the invisible other, humans can learn to make that invisible other real. Yeah, so this is sort of the crux of the problem, isn't it? I mean, um, if we believe there's an invisible other, I think the human mind can make sufficiently robust argument that person or that entity exists.
Hmm.
But for others, that entity doesn't exist. I mean, it's only for that particular individual that entity exists, right? So
Hmm.
there's sort of a customization question here in some ways.
Hmm. Yeah,
Is God customized to individuals?
sure. And everybody has their own understanding of who God is. If you're part of a church that has a very close community, they will try to help you or force you to have an understanding of God that's shared by other people.
Hmm.
But yeah, of course.
So are we missing a trick? So organized religions, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, they appear to have some sort of systematic framework for God, as if
Yes.
as if everybody who believes in it should have the same, sort of God. Are they missing a trick? I mean, that doesn't seem very likely. Yeah.
So if you were a Christian, you would be paying attention to the Bible.
Yeah.
And one of the things you would notice would be that there are many, many different ideas about who God is in the Bible. There's a
Mm.
lot of room in that Bible. And so people read that book and they come up with their own idea. And really, the goal of a church is to persuade you that you should accept the church's idea and that you should believe that God matters. That's one of the things that happens in church. They kind of remind you that God matters.
Mm.
And and they remind you that however they're understanding you know God, that's the correct understanding of God, that God is angry, or God is loving, or God
Mhm.
is forgiving, or God is this, or
Mm.
God is that. Many people in that church will gather together and talk, and you can do a lot of talking, without realizing that other people have a different understanding of God.
Hmm.
As the word is pretty loose,
Yeah.
and the things that people say are pretty general and pretty loose. And, when you actually look at how that God is created for an individual,
Hmm.
there's a lot of differences between people.
Hmm.
I've heard people say, that they thought that God would make them paraplegic. So they sort of had this model that God was really, really mean,
Hmm.
even though in the same church, somebody had been going to church for years,
Yeah.
sitting next to them in the pew or in the gym,
Hmm.
would have a very different model of God.
Hmm.
So, what the concept of God offers for people is that the concept has the possibility
Yeah.
of helping somebody to have a very loving figure that's invisible but feels real.
Hmm.
But sometimes you need some help to get to a good representation of that. I mean, you probably know that people have representations of their parents,
Yeah.
and sometimes those are more loving and sometimes they're less loving.
Hmm.
And sometimes a therapist will help you to change your understanding of your parent and develop a kinder representation or a more accurate representation, or a
Hmm.
way of feeling that you can feel less harassed by the representation that you have in your head.
Yeah. So at the crux of your argument, then, Tanya, is it's idea that God is individual specific, customizable entity. And so correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just sort of thinking in this direction. So any sort of aggregate definitions of religion and God are not going to be useful for a large number of people. It might have been useful in the past because you're sort of getting a large number of people and saying, X is God, and don't think or don't ask questions, type thing. But we are not in that regime anymore. So God is customizable and individualistic,
Mhm.
and rejecting that as a concept, we don't have robust information to do that. That's really what I'm taking away from this.
Okay, I'm not sure I fully follow you. I think one of the puzzles for me as an anthropologist
Yeah.
is trying to understand how these concepts like God, which are very vague concepts,
Yeah.
so people have this word God, and they pay attention to the people around them, and they realize a lot of people pay attention to this word. And there's a lot that's written about this word, but there's really quite a lot, very
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
ideas. So a friend of mine, a guy called Pascal Boyer, talks about a word like God as an empty concept.
Mm.
So, if you're looking at a zebra, say if you're going to define zebra,
Hmm.
then everybody in the world, everybody around you, they can point to this thing, which is a zebra, if
Yeah.
there are zebras around you.
Right.
And he was writing this in a place where there were zebras. So, as something trots by and the kid can say, that's a zebra? And the parent can say, no, 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 that's not a zebra.
Mm.
That's a gazelle.
Yeah.
Zebras have stripes.
Mhm.
And so the kid will learn by the way the parent or other people are pointing to something very concrete,
Yeah.
how to use the word.
Right.
So God is a little messier because you can't really
Yeah.
point to something concrete. And nobody says, oh, there goes God. There are lots of individual descriptions of God. And so you sort of, when you're somebody like me, you're an anthropologist, you're kind of a cognitive scientist, you're interested in the ways in
Mm.
which people will give meaning to this concept. And they'll
Mm.
give meaning in very, in ways that become more and more different from people as they get older. So with a zebra, Generally, people get very, very good at identifying zebras, and they're completely correct, and everybody will agree with them. When people get older, their ideas
Yeah.
about God get pretty different from each other. Not more like each other, more different from each other.
More different. Okay. So I haven't really thought through this, Tanya, but it appears that there is scope for a universal God. So as humanity advances 100, 200, 300 years from now, let's say religions sort of converge because their basic ideas might be pretty universal. It's just that they're sort of I don't know what the right term is, the worships and all the things that they do um, don't quite align. But as humanity advances, we might have a possibility that we could get to a universal religion and possibly universal God. At that point, all the uncertainty is removed, and you can go on from there.
We'll see.
We'll see. Excellent. Yeah.
Good. That's a good note on which to end.
Thanks, Tanya. Yeah, thanks for spending time with me.
Okay,
Thank
take
you.
care. Bye bye.
Bye.